All right, welcome back to the Leadership Puzzle. Today we have an incredible guest joining us. Cydney White is arguably one of my favorite people. I've known her for a couple of years now, and if you've ever wondered how to navigate high-stake leadership moments and drive real business impact from the HR seat, you're in for a treat. Cydney is a true business strategist. She has led HR through massive M&A integrations, leadership transitions, rapid growth environments. She's done it all and knows what it means to really drive change into an organization. But let's be real, when it comes to earning that coveted seat at the table that all HR leaders covet, she knows how to do it. She's done it. And she knows how to grow that influence. And so I don't know where our conversation is going to go today, but there's one thing for sure. It will be fun and informative. So let's get into it. Cydney, welcome to the Leadership Puzzle.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And I'll try to live up to that introduction. But thank you for having me. And I'm happy to be doing this with you today.
Yeah, no, this is great. So I want to start, whenever we talk, we talk about lots of different things and we could go off on lots of rabbit trails, but there's a topic that's kind of been in my my mind for a little while is this future of work. Mm-hmm. and how HR plays into a world that's just shifting fast. It's moving, it's changing. I mean, oh gosh, today's tariff, tomorrow it might not be. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So, if you had to predict, I know it's hard, if you had to predict one, really big time change in trend in HR, that HR leaders and other leaders, frankly, need to be prepared for. What would you say that is?
Yeah, this may be cliche, but I mean, I think the thing that's top of mind for most leaders today, not just HR leaders, but certainly for myself, is preparing for this AI transformation. Mm-hmm. I mean, at this point, AI is not really a new technology anymore. It's been around for a couple of years, but I believe the adoption rate's been pretty slow, just to overall lack of understanding and all the various tools that are out there. I actually heard an analogy the other day comparing this shift to the introduction of the internet. Yep. And then subsequently, the evolution of the smartphone. Yep. So when you think of it in those terms, there's not really an option not to get on board. So leaders they need to educate themselves on all the various tools and uses and then become change champions for that in their organizations. With that, though, I think it's important to look beyond just tools, right? Because AI isn't just about efficiency and automation. I mean, we're redefining the way that we work. Right. And that has a people element to it, right? So HR needs to lead that change. We have to assess the skills that are needed. We have to figure out how to properly engage employees to adopt the change so that they're not fearful of the change, right? That their fear is always an element. There's other key elements to consider as well. I mean, you have to be sure people are using AI ethically. And then there's going to be some policy administration that goes with that. I think the key is going to be how to keep human-centered leadership at the forefront, so that employees get excited and engaged about where we're going. So in my mind, I think that's the answer. Companies that can leverage AI while keeping people at the core, they'll definitely have a competitive advantage.
Yeah. You brought up something that is interesting. There's this theme out there that, it's people need completely different skills and capabilities to use AI. And I guess that's true if they're programming, right? If they're systems, they're having to build that out. But for you or I, right? Or even for HR or, the leader, they don't necessarily need completely different skills or capabilities. It's just that willingness to open their mind and using this new tool that can be transformative in the way and how they do their work. Is that right?
Yeah,
Or
I think so. I think so. Absolutely. It's because anybody can learn how to use a tool. It's like a new app, right? How to use a new tool. It's like having a new app or something like that. You can learn how it functions. But I think the challenge is in, to your point, that creativity and challenging, like, what can I use this for? A good example is, I think most people use Chat GPT in some form or another. And initially, when you engage Chat GPT, it's like, hey, draft me an email response. But when you start thinking about how to engage with AI on a conversational level, right, to have like the what ifs and have it give you theoretical ideas that actually change, ooh, let me think about how my strategy shifts as a result of this. That's a little bit of an example, I believe. So.
yeah, I was doing some work for a client. I probably shouldn't say this on air, but and I knew I could go do an analysis and do the full thing, but I thought, what would ChatGPT do if I put in the data and asked it to do the analysis for me? So I did, and I was completely. And I've been using ChatGPT since it came out in beta, so I've been a user for the last couple of years, and I was like, wow, look at this. I didn't have to take the 3 hours to do the analysis. It spit it out. I
Yeah.
needed to do some things, but
Yeah.
just that testing. It's like, well, what if you use it for this?
It's a good point. I think, that's a key mindset that we need to have is asking that curiosity mindset, right? Asking what
Curiosity.
if.
That's it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, like I said, it's what we know it can do versus challenging what it can possibly do for us,
What
right? That's a
else? Yeah.
shift.
Well, it's getting out of the box. I mean, I remember, years ago, right? It's like, oh well, if you need to get creative, get out of your box of your thinking, and I think what we're learning with AI is there's no box.
I mean, I don't profess to be, highly knowledgeable on AI tools at this point. I am learning like anyone else, but I think that's my deduction, right? Is that there isn't like the boundaries and the possibilities are limitless.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm interested to continue to learn more about it for sure.
So how do you stay ahead of that curve? I mean, personally, so if you were going to give any advice to folks, well, this is what I do to make sure that I'm keeping up as best as I can. It's changing quickly.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to push yourself to continually learn. I mean, we all get busy, right? We have our jobs and our things in our lives. So making that time to put education at the forefront and not being okay with, oh, I know these basic things, right? But as fast as it's changing, you just really have to continue to learn and then think like a business owner, as we talked about, asking those what if questions. Um, I mean, I think the other understanding is that HR is no longer about, policies and people. We're here to drive business outcomes. So it's important to be proactive. It's important to anticipate needs before they're upon you.
Yeah.
Right? You have to understand where your business is headed and where your industry is headed. And then be able to connect that to what's going on in your organization, right? That the talent shifts that are happening. Um, so, I mean, if HR is only reacting, then we're already behind. We have to be thought leaders around that. And I think the only way you can be a thought leader is to truly be continually educating and learning about possibilities, not just with AI, with everything, right?
Yeah.
But in the context of AI, I think it's so vast at this point that there's so much to learn and so many, as I mentioned, just possibilities out there. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the most successful HR leaders are just ones that can drive those business results through their own learning and education.
I think it was maybe McKinsey had a study. This must have been it was last year. No, I think it was a Gartner, and they put all of the functions uh, in where they were in relation to just technology adoption, and they were tying it to AI and preparedness for AI. And it will probably not surprise you, but it certainly is sad that we were second to last in terms of the functions, use of technology, and preparedness for AI. So at least we weren't last. The legal teams, the corporate
At
legal
least we
teams
weren't
were
last.
last. That's right.
Yeah. Oh man, but I don't. It isn't surprising, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, I think it's just because we get kind of stuck in our ways and our known best practices of
Yeah.
doing things that historically we haven't been the ones who are the innovators per se.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of
Yeah.
the challenge. So hopefully we can change that
Yeah.
rating from
Yeah.
Gartner next year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, AI is certainly, in everyone's forefront, but there's other things that are, I don't know if they're gonna, I mean, they've changed the way that we work, but I don't know what's gonna happen. I'd love to just pick your brain on like return to office versus hybrid versus fully remote. I mean, that still seems to be an evolving kind of question. Do you have any insights on what you think what that trend might look like?
I can tell you what I've experienced and what I've seen. And I think, when COVID hit, right, the pendulum swung and everything was remote for a very long time. And I think, we're kind of starting to normalize a bit. What I've observed is that at least in the larger cities like Dallas, where I'm at, a lot of the companies, most of them are back at work, at least on a hybrid schedule, some pushing toward 4 or 5 days a week again. So I think there was something that people felt that was missing in a fully remote environment where they wanted to be somewhat back in the office, aside from just real estate expense, right?
Oh yeah,
Wasted real estate expense.
which is a real
Um,
thing for companies.
yeah, I think you have to again tie it to your business strategy. Are we able to find the talent that we need in these locations where we have brick and mortar buildings? If not, we need to hire, nationally or remotely or internationally, and that's going to require a remote workforce. I think you have to manufacturing environments are going to be a little different than SaaS companies. So I think you have to look at what works for your business. And
Yeah.
when it comes to getting people on board, if there's a shift from a remote only environment back to a hybrid and someone's now having to go in, I think there has to at least be a timeline to allow people to make preparations. Maybe they haven't had to worry about, childcare in a separate location, or maybe they haven't had to worry about commute times. And so people have to make these changes and shifts in their personal life,
Yeah.
and that takes a little bit of time. But then also helping people understand like why it's important to the organization to be in person at least some of the time.
Yeah.
If it's just because there's a trust issue, I don't think that's going to go very far in getting people on board. But that's kind of my thoughts and how I've approached it. I've been through that at a couple of companies now, just asking that question. And I think it's just with anything else, if you keep people at the forefront and make sure they feel like you're considering them, and that there's, good reason, good business reason behind the decisions that we make.
Yeah.
Most times you can get people on board.
And I imagine that culture also, the company culture also plays a big part in people's interest in going back to the office. Um, if you've got a really horrible culture, then people probably want to stay away. Whereas if it's an engaging culture and I'll stay away from the fun word, but where you enjoy the people and there's a camaraderie there, it's a different sell to people.
Yeah. Like, what do we gain from being in person,
Yeah.
and it's connection, right? There is some efficiency to it. You get the water cooler talk, and there are people who love that. And there's even the people who want to work remotely even love that. They just don't want to have to do it all the time.
Right.
I think that's what people loved about the shift to remote work was they're in control. They're in
Yeah.
control of their schedule and, their environment. And, to come back in the office full time, maybe you're relinquishing a little bit of that. So it's just a matter of setting clear expectations and helping people understand, why we're doing what we're doing and working with them as they make the change.
Yeah. All right. So still a lot to work out on what's going to happen there. But one of the things that I think we can certainly agree on is there's a lot of change, and I think that there's going to be a whole lot more change, and I want to shift topics a little bit because you've led organizations through M&A, integration, some rapid growth. I mean, lots of different types of change, and I suspect as at some point over the next year, 2 years, we're going to see the economy really picking up and interest rates come down, and you're gonna have a lot more companies buying and a lot more integration work and whatnot. So I think this is going to be part of our landscape in the near future. And so I'd love to get your insights on what's the one or two things that you've learned along the way that most leaders get wrong when there's a big change, whether it's an integration or some other kind of organization change, whatever that might look like. So give us some words of wisdom on that.
Yeah. When you think of change and change is coming, we have to create our plans and our strategies and we have to execute, right? This is first thing that comes to people's mind. I think the most common mistake and the easiest to make, right, is not only because we got to do the thing and how to do the thing, but then is underestimating the emotional side of change. Right. So often we're focused on strategy, execution plans, and those are all very important. But whether or not that change is accepted and then adopted is really dependent upon how people feel about it. Right. Yeah. So that has to be what you tackle first. Right. Leaders often communicate the what and the how, but they really forget that why. And then that's where resistance starts building. So you have to understand that change is personal before it's organizational.
Right.
And HR's role is to connect that strategy with that psychology and help ensure that people see themselves in that future vision, in that future environment. And so you're placing that emotional connection at the forefront of the change. If people understand why we're doing something and they can see how they fit in and they can get excited about it, your chances of success in that change are, phenomenally higher. So that's kind of, I think that the thing that leaders miss most is just that emotional connection to how people are maneuvering through change, how it impacts them.
Yeah. And a lot of leaders don't deal with that emotional side of things. It's like, oh, let HR do that.
Right.
But I love what you said. You said, leaders need to understand that change is first personal before it's organizational, and that's a great quote. So on this topic, what's the most challenging leadership moment you've had to navigate in a big change effort?
Yeah. Well, so I spent most of my career, I'll kind of put this in context. I've spent literally all but one company I've worked in has been in the private equity space, right?
Yep.
And so this comes with a certain set of expectations on its own. You understand there's going to be frequent change in strategy and probably turnover in leadership and of course then maneuvering through a fair amount of acquisition activity on one side or the other. So I think my greatest challenge has been in getting our teams and culture comfortable and prepared with that idea, right? When I recruit people to come into our business, the business I'm in now, we're highly acquisitive. And I really make sure they understand, like, this is the kind of environment you're coming into, right? And this is what it looks like. This is what you might see one day. This is kind of some things that we've experienced. This is what's normal. And it may not feel normal. You onboard hundreds of people, but then you're probably going to have redundancies. So it's likely that you're going to have a rift. So most times when people hear of a rift, they think that business is in trouble. But at the end of the day, when you're aligning businesses, those things are normal. So I try and set clear expectations with people.
That's good.
But under that vein, right, probably the most complex acquisition I faced was one where we were acquired by a corporate entity and then simultaneously had to merge another one of their portfolio companies into ours while integrating with the corporate entity. So it's like a three-way
wow.
integration. And it was a larger company. I mean, about 5,000 employees. So to further complicate things, then the other portco that we were merging with was a direct competitor of ours. So you can imagine not only the tactical alignment challenges, right, from an organizational standpoint, but then the cultural barriers that we were faced with, those were really significant. And essentially, I mean, we were dealing with pre-existing competition mindsets. There was a total us versus them mentality. Oh, and then don't forget the fear that comes with mergers, right? And then
Oh,
the
yeah.
job insecurity that creates. So the goal was really to begin to build one cohesive team while aligning everyone to the new corporate structure. There was no longer Portco A, no longer Portco B. We are one team and we are aligned to mama and papa. Okay. Um, and so, I mean, it was a really big
Wow.
challenge. There was just so much there. And I think, my approach was to try and lead with transparency and empathy. I mean, you can only be so transparent, but ultimately, I mean, we gave the good, bad, and the ugly. We tried to just lead with that,
Yeah.
if we're honest, then we can at least build trust, if nothing else, even if people feel like this isn't the place for them, that's fine, but we've been honest. And so, people resist what they don't understand. And so in that, we over communicated. We had regular, frequent, like weekly communications about things. We had a newsletter. People could get updates. They had
Nice.
all kinds of things. We gave employees a voice in shaping what that new structure and culture can look like. So we did focus groups, and not only that, but surveys, and
Wow.
really trying to have them be included in part of the solutioning for what we wanted to be. And then we had certainly our leaders get aligned on the shared vision of what we were doing. So we're all speaking the same language. We were open and transparent with people about what the future org could look like. We told them we're not going to need twice as many people to run one business. We're
Right.
not, so over time, we're going to have to right size the organization. And that was a hard message because instantly you're going to have people that jump ship, people who are quiet quitting. You're going to have some of that, but we decided to go that route first, and just if they opt out, then they opt out. At the end of the day, we wanted to be honest.
Yeah.
And so, we made good on our promise to treat people with dignity and respect as we moved through those changes. And so, again, sometimes business can be really challenging, but if people believe you have their best interests in mind, then their level of support is usually much greater. But I would say
Yeah.
that's probably like the most significant challenge that I've had to face as far as getting not only the organization aligned, right,
Yeah.
structurally, but
Wow.
culturally as well.
That I've done my fair share of integrations, but boy, that one takes the cake. A lot
It
of moving
was, it
parts.
was, it was interesting.
Yeah, I
It
can
was a
imagine.
challenge.
I can imagine. Uh, we could probably spend the next 30 minutes just talking about the nuances of that, and how did you
Yeah.
go about getting all the leadership. So, well, let me ask you this. So you had these two A company A and B coming together. Who got to decide who was going to be on the leadership team? Was that the acquiring company, or was it, hey, let's sit down and let's figure out who the best executives from both companies and merge that way?
So it was a partnership, right, with the corporate entity, but it was made clear for us as we were the latecomers to the organization. The other Portco was already there,
Uh,
but we knew that our product was going to be the one that was the sustainable one, and
the
so
flagship,
therefore,
yeah.
Mhm. And so we were going to be rolling them into our organization. So what we did say, and for a very long time, we actually kept all members of both leadership teams together for a
Interesting.
while. hmm
Interesting.
was a leadership team, an ELT of 13, which is in a small company of 450 people.
Oh,
So I know it was not ideal, and then but quickly over time, people started to realize, oh, okay, what their ideas and who had the ideas for the future, and where their future might lie on the
interesting.
team.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of, just conversational work and team building work and understanding who we are as individuals and our leadership methodologies through workshops we led and participated in. So we did finally get to a reduced team and one team to lead the organization. But I think that the way we went about that was very thoughtful and methodical, right? To make sure it was the right team to lead the organization forward.
No, that's great. That's great. Clearly you had a seat at the table to be able to drive this integration and of course others. So you've learned on what it takes to get to be a real partner to the CEO and the executive team. I think surprisingly, a lot of HR professionals still struggle to really play at that executive level. I may have said it before on this podcast. Every time that I go out and I speak, I ask the audience, okay, how many of you want a seat at the table? And like everybody raise their hand and say, well, how many already have it? And only 30%. Pretty consistently, about 30% will say, yep, HR is at a seat at the table, and everybody else is clamoring for it.
Wow.
I know it keeps surprising me because HR is now.
I wouldn't have thought that. I mean, fortunately, I think, at least I thought, most companies these days understand that HR is more than just a back office payroll shop, doing payroll and benefits. But so I thought that getting that seat at the table wouldn't be as difficult these days. But it sounds like there's still quite a few people struggling with that.
Surprisingly, I'm constantly amazed. I think a lot of it still has to come from the historical context of, you might have CEOs that never really had HR, so they don't know what HR can bring. They might see HR as, okay, you handle the hiring, firing, and payroll. Or it's certainly changing, but you have a lot of HR leaders that have been that reactive back office mindset, policy police, if you will, administrative. And, they've just done that for so long that they haven't figured out how to make that change. So it's,
I think what you do while in that seat at the table is where the rubber meets the road, right? So what got you to the table won't keep you there, right? So if you get that seat, then you have to truly show up as, a business-minded partner to the team that's there. So we've got to stop, speaking in HR speak and just HR terms. We've got to think more broadly in business terms. You got to be able to tie your talent strategy to sort of the business initiatives like revenue and growth and market competitiveness. And CEOs they don't care about employee engagement as an isolated metric, right? They care about how it impacts productivity. They care about how it impacts innovation and then retention of key talent. So if HR can quantify its impact on the bottom line in that way, then they stop being a support function and they become a business accelerator. And so when you're adding that value and having those type of conversations, I think that's, one way that the seat at the table is earned. And I'll say it's earned, right? Because you don't just get to be there just to be there, right?
Yeah.
I think if I could, I'll double click on that a little bit and give a couple of examples of tying. I think we say these things sometimes like tying your talent processes to business strategy, and it's like, but what does that mean?
No, please. This is fascinating.
Yeah, like a couple of examples. So developing org structures to support your revenue growth targets if you want to double your revenue next year, right? So if a company is expanding into a new market, and that's how they're going to double their revenue, then HR's role has to be to assess and evaluate not only our current talent, right, and where we are, but then wherever this new market is, what kind of talent supply is there? And so with that, then you have two outcomes, right? Then you have to build development programs to close the skills gaps of your current talent, right? But then also, where are we going to find this talent in this new markets, and what's going to attract them to us, and how are we going to meet those hiring timelines if talent supply is low?
Right.
So that's like a connective idea, tying that talent strategy to business outcome.
Yeah.
Maybe another example is in talent acquisition. If a company is trying to work to integrate AI per se into their strategy, then HR is going to have to partner with business leaders and figure out, okay, so what are those critical skills that are needed, and how are we going to redesign these jobs, right? And then write job roles and descriptions to be inclusive of those skills, and make sure that these skills are actually utilized. Because I think what we have in our minds and what we want to do is great on paper, right? But then putting those skills to use and actually utilize them is another element. So that's how HR can support in that. And then when we know what that looks like, that job looks like, how are we going to, attract that talent that we need with those new skill sets? What's going to make our company look attractive to them.
Right.
So then there's a couple different things in that too. Then you have to really double click and look into the way you work and the work processes and how are those changing, and lead change management for that. So I hope that helps illustrate a little bit how, a couple of examples for how you can take your talent strategy and actually tie it to your business outcomes. And that is what makes a true business partner, right, at the executive table.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember working for one CHRO, and the CEO every year on their review, and I know this because they shared it with me, was the CEO wanted them to understand the business better. I mean, he was a good CHRO, but he didn't understand the nuances of the business like a business leader.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have taken that business leadership capability to a whole nother level.
Yeah. I think it's kind of we've been done a disservice a little bit, right? Because all the training, the development, growth in HR does not include those business elements, right? So
what is
it's kind of like kids in high school these days aren't taught finance and real estate, right? It's the same kind of thing. So you learn all of the ins and outs about all of the HR function and the compliance and the rules and the things and the best practices and all of that, but very little is there a lot of education around business, financials and structures and those kinds of things. And so, evaluating deals and all of that. And I think that's an element that we miss a little bit, right? And so then we kind of get pigeonholed into this, we're not strategic. We don't have the business acumen. So again, back to that learning comment, you just really need to be continually trying to stretch yourself to learn about the business and the market.
It is that you hit on an interesting point, because if I just think through the last handful of companies, one of the things that every HR professional in the group's like, oh, we want like finance for dummies. We want to understand the P&L. We want to understand how EBITDA is made. We want to understand gross margin. And it's like, wow, those are the stakes to just get to the table. If you don't understand those things, you're not really playing.
That's right. It's so important.
So, okay. Gosh, let's see, where do we want to go from here? So, well, let's do this. A couple years ago, you were nominated as the HR Executive of the Year. Clearly, you've made huge impacts in your organization. I mean, gosh, you've shared a little bit with us already. If you had to credit your success to one leadership principle, what do you think that would be? Or two, or three?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very hard, right? That's we distill it down to one. Thinking back to that, right? I think what earned me that particular nomination was a reflection of the of the business impact that HR can make when we're bold and strategic and people-centered. I like to call myself a builder. So I often go into organizations and looking for ways to grow and scale the business. And in that particular role, we had made a ton of change in a very short time. So it was true change that impacted how we worked. It impacted how people felt in the organization. So I guess collectively, though, if I credit my success, I mean, not only for that nomination, but in my career to one leadership principle, it's probably going to be people first with an eye on evolution. I never wanted to be the person that goes into an organization and just kind of picks up the baton and carries forward with the way things have been done. I want to make it better. I want to make an impact, and so that's been kind of my philosophy. But keeping people at the forefront, I think, is, I mean, that's your greatest asset, right? I mean, not to be cliche with that, but that's how you make change happen. And those are those are your graders, right? They're the ones who are going to assess on how you've done with that. I think the best leaders know that high performing cultures don't happen by accident. It's really intentional. You have to be very intentional in creating that. And so I've always prioritized creating environments where people thrive. And then when people thrive, the business will win. So I think that's kind of my principle, my philosophy in leading, and how I like to go into an organization. Yeah.
Love it. Before we started recording, we talked a little bit about mental wellness and whatnot, and I'll finish on this question. But PE is not for the PE-backed companies are not for the faint of heart. High stress, lots of moving parts. Speed is paramount. So what's your go-to strategy when you're feeling overwhelmed as a leader? How do you make sure that you are centered and can give your employees and the organization your best?
Yeah, I think, perspective matters, right? Because there are going to be the times where it gets busy, and there's also times when it's going to be heavy, right? And that's just in your work life. Then let's not add on any of your personal life to it, right? We're all going to have these kinds of moments. I think for me, it's a mindset of, for lack of better words, or this too shall pass. I mean, we're going to get through it. So let's think about, and we're going to be fine, right? So let's think about what needs to happen, and let's think about the best way to do this, putting people first, treating people with respect, and then get through the thing. And then as far as decompression, I revive myself in solitude. So walks by myself, just kind of sitting and relaxing, like in a decompressed state. And so that's kind of how I rejuvenate, or, having some good quality time with, a close friend or a family member, something like that. That's kind of how I regroup, because it kind of puts things in perspective for me, is that, yes, this work thing is very, very heavy and stressful at the time, but it's work. And it's important, and it influences the type of life I'm able to lead. But also, quality of life is more important. And so I want to be the best I can be for my people at work, my teams, my kids, my husband. And so balancing that, just making sure I'm taking that time to sort of, center myself and reground is it's almost a daily practice. I say almost. We're not really about doing it every day.
It should be, but well, Cydney, this conversation has just been packed with just some great insights. Maybe I'd even say it's packed with gold. Lots of great wisdom. Thank you for sharing with us today. I really hope you come back and visit, because we just started to scratch the surface of what you're able to bring.
Oh, so. Yeah. Well, I love the work that you're doing with this podcast, the Leadership Puzzle, and the work that you're doing in general. I mean, you've got your hands in so many cookie jars, and kudos to you and your success. And I just really appreciate you reaching out to me and letting me be a part of this. It's been fun.
Oh, it's awesome. And to everyone listening, if you have enjoyed this episode, do us a favor, like, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep bringing these great conversations to the internet. We'd love to hear your thoughts too. Drop us a comment or connect with us on LinkedIn. So until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep putting those pieces together. We'll see you soon at the Leadership Puzzle.